It was 11:47 p.m. when my phone buzzed with Mark's goodnight text. I smiled before I even looked at it. We'd been married 3 years, and he still texted me every night when he worked late. Sweet, right? I opened the message expecting our usual, "Love you, good night, beautiful." Instead, I stared at 5 words that made my blood freeze. "Love you too, Emily." I blinked, read it again. "My name is Sarah. I've been Sarah for 28 years. I screenshot the message with shaking hands, my heart hammering against my ribs. Who the hell is Emily? I had no idea that this one autocorrect mistake would unravel my entire marriage and save me from years of lies I never saw coming. Before I continue the story, please subscribe. I need to reach 1,000 subscribers so I can keep bringing you stories like this every day. It's just one click for you, but it means a lot to me. But let me back up and tell you how we got here, because none of this makes sense without context. 5 years ago, I was a freelance graphic designer working from my laptop in this tiny coffee shop downtown. You know the type: exposed brick, overpriced lattes, and indie music that made you feel artistically superior. I was there every Tuesday and Thursday, same corner table, same oat milk cortado. Mark noticed me first. He'd started coming in around the same time, always in these perfectly pressed shirts and carrying a leather messenger bag that screamed, "I'm important in marketing." He'd steal glances while pretending to read emails. Finally, after 3 weeks of this dance, he approached my table and said, "I love your laptop stickers. Very eclectic." It was cheesy, but his smile was genuine. We started talking and I was completely charmed. Mark was ambitious, funny, and had this way of making me feel like the most interesting person in the room. He worked for a mid-sized marketing firm and had big dreams about climbing the corporate ladder. I found his drive attractive. It was so different from the laid-back, creative guys I usually dated. Our romance was intense and fast. Weekend trips to wine country, surprise flowers delivered to my apartment, long conversations about our future together. Mark proposed on a beach in Carmel after exactly 2 years of dating. I said yes before he finished asking. I thought I'd won the lottery. Mark was stable, successful, and seemed genuinely devoted to me. I gladly played the supportive girlfriend, then wife. When he got promoted and needed to relocate for work, I packed up my entire life without hesitation. When he worked late nights and weekends, I understood. He was building our future. When he said we should wait a few more years before having kids so he could establish himself, I agreed. I became the perfect corporate wife. I attended his company events, charmed his colleagues, and never complained when work took priority over date nights. I adjusted my freelance schedule around his needs and turned down projects that conflicted with his social calendar. Looking back now, I realize I'd slowly erased myself to make room for Mark's ambitions. But at the time, I thought I was being a good partner. I thought we were a team. I had no idea I was playing a game where only one person knew the rules. I stared at that screenshot for hours, literally hours. I zoomed in on every letter, as if somehow the pixels would rearrange themselves and spell Sarah instead of Emily. I analyzed the autocorrect possibilities in my head like some deranged detective. Maybe he meant to type, "love you," and his phone suggested, "love you too, Emily," from what? A previous conversation? But that would mean he'd texted those exact words to someone named Emily before, which didn't exactly make me feel better. I kept opening and closing the screenshot, hoping I'd imagined it, but there it was every single time. "Love you too, Emily." The "two" was what really got me. It implied she'd said it first. It implied a conversation, a back and forth, an intimacy that made my chest tighten. I tried every rational explanation I could think of. Maybe he was texting his cousin Emily about family stuff and got confused. But Mark doesn't have a cousin named Emily. Maybe it was his co-worker Emily and he accidentally sent a work message to me. But who says "love you" in work messages? I felt like I was losing my mind. sitting there in our king-sized bed at midnight, staring at my phone while my husband slept peacefully beside me. The same husband who'd kissed me goodbye that morning and told me he'd be working late on a big presentation. The same husband who'd been working late a lot lately. Now that I thought about it, my stomach felt like I'd swallowed a rock. You know that feeling when something is fundamentally wrong but you can't quite put your finger on it? Like when you walk into your house and something's been moved, but you can't remember what it used to look like? That's what this felt like, except the something was my entire marriage. I didn't sleep that night. I lay there listening to Mark breathe, wondering who Emily was and why my husband's phone knew to autocorrect to her name. I kept checking the time. 1:23 a.m., 2:47 a.m., 4:15 a.m. Each hour that passed felt like evidence of something I wasn't ready to face. By the time my alarm went off, I'd convinced myself I was being paranoid. But I'd also screenshotted that text message in 3 different ways and uploaded it to my cloud storage, just in case. The next morning, I waited until Mark was drinking his coffee and checking emails before I brought it up. Casual, you know, like it was no big deal. "Hey, weird question," I said, holding up my phone. "But you texted me 'love you too, Emily' last night instead of my name." I tried to laugh, like we were sharing a funny story. Mark barely glanced up from his laptop. "Oh, that," he said, and then he did this laugh, this weird short laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "My phone's been acting up lately. Autocorrect is going crazy." He took a sip of coffee and finally looked at me. "I was texting my sister Emily about some work stuff for her company, and I guess when I went to text you, it got confused." Wait, Mark has a sister named Emily? In 3 years of marriage, I'd never heard him mention a sister Emily. He has one sister, Rebecca, who lives in Portland and works as a veterinarian. I know this because I've met her exactly 4 times and she sends us Christmas cards with photos of her golden retriever. But I didn't say that. Instead, I nodded and said, "Oh, okay, that makes sense." Because I wanted it to make sense. I wanted there to be a perfectly logical explanation that didn't involve my husband having intimate conversations with mysterious women. Mark went back to his laptop, like the conversation was over, but I kept watching him. His shoulders were tense, in a way they usually weren't during his morning routine. He kept glancing at his phone when he thought I wasn't looking. And that laugh, God, that laugh. It was the same laugh he used when his boss asked if he'd finished a project he hadn't started yet, or when his mother asked if we were trying to have kids. It was his "I'm lying but hoping you won't push it" laugh. I'd heard it before but never directed at me. I poured myself coffee and sat across from him, studying his face. This was the man I'd shared a bed with for 3 years, the man whose morning routine I knew better than my own. He always checked his email first, then sports scores, then the weather. But today, he kept picking up his phone and setting it back down, like he was waiting for something or someone. "Sister Emily," I repeated in my head, trying to make it stick. Maybe she was a half-sister I'd never heard about. Maybe she was going through a rough time and Mark was being supportive. I wanted so badly to believe him that I almost convinced myself it was true. Almost. Over the next few weeks, I became a detective in my own home, and I hated myself for it. But once you start noticing things, you can't stop. Mark's phone was always face down now. Always. During dinner, while watching TV, even when he was in the shower, that phone was face down on the nightstand like it was hiding secrets. When it buzzed with notifications, he'd grab it faster than someone reaching for a falling glass. He'd gotten protective about his devices in a way that felt new and wrong. If I walked into the room while he was texting, he'd casually switch to checking emails or close his phone entirely. When I asked who he was talking to, he'd say, "Just work stuff," with that same dismissive tone you'd use to swat away a fly. The late nights at work became more frequent too. 3, sometimes 4 nights a week. Mark would text me around 5 p.m. saying he'd be home late. Big project, client emergency, last-minute presentation. Always something urgent and unquestionable. He'd roll in around 10 or 11 p.m., claiming he'd grabbed dinner at the office but never seeming particularly tired for someone who'd been grinding for 14 hours. I started feeling like I was losing my mind. I'd catch myself analyzing every conversation, looking for inconsistencies in his stories, checking to see if his clothes smelled different when he came home. This wasn't who I was. I'd never been the suspicious, paranoid wife who checked her husband's pockets and questioned his every move. But I also couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted in our marriage, and I was the only one who didn't get the memo. The worst part was how normal Mark acted about everything else. He still kissed me goodbye in the morning, still asked about my day, still reached for my hand during movies. He'd make jokes about his crazy work schedule and promise things would calm down soon. It was like living with someone who was perfectly himself 90% of the time, and the other 10% was this stranger who guarded his phone like state secrets. I started wondering if I was imagining things. Maybe this was just what marriage looked like after a few years. Maybe all husbands became more private about their phones. Maybe I was creating problems where none existed, turning innocent behavior into evidence of some elaborate betrayal. But late at night, when Mark was sleeping and I was staring at the ceiling, I couldn't escape the truth that was crystallizing in my chest. Something was very, very wrong. I finally cracked and told Jessica everything over lunch at our usual spot downtown. Jessica has been my best friend since college, and she's one of those people who can read a room in 30 seconds and spot bullshit from a mile away. I laid it all out. The Emily text, the sister story that made no sense, the face-down phone, the late nights, the weird protective behavior. I felt ridiculous saying it all out loud, like I was some paranoid housewife from a Lifetime movie. "I don't know, Jess," I said, stirring my salad around my plate. "Maybe I'm reading too much into everything. Maybe phones just autocorrect weird things and I'm being crazy." Jessica set down her fork and looked at me with this expression I'd seen her use on her teenage daughter when she was obviously lying about where she'd been. "Sarah," she said quietly, "in 15 years of friendship, I have never known you to be paranoid about anything. You're literally the most trusting person I know. You give people the benefit of the doubt to a fault." She leaned forward. "So if your gut is telling you something's wrong, something's probably wrong." I felt this flood of relief hearing someone else say it, like I'd been holding my breath for weeks and could finally exhale. "But what if I'm wrong?" I asked. "What if I'm ruining my marriage over autocorrect?" Jessica reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Honey, you're not ruining anything. You're paying attention. And from what you're telling me, Mark's behavior has changed significantly. The phone thing alone would have me asking questions." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I've been married for 12 years. David leaves his phone everywhere, on the counter, in the car, dead on the couch for hours. Because when you have nothing to hide, you don't think about hiding it." That hit me like a physical blow, because she was absolutely right. 6 months ago, Mark's phone was just another object in our house. Now it was practically surgically attached to his body. "Trust your instincts," Jessica said. "They're trying to tell you something important, and whatever you find out, whatever you decide to do about it, I'm here for you, okay?" For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was going crazy. I felt like maybe, just maybe, I was finally paying attention. That night, after Mark texted that he'd be working late again, I did something I'd never done in 3 years of marriage. I logged into our shared credit card account to snoop. My hands were literally shaking as I typed in the password, like I was breaking into someone else's life instead of checking my own finances. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that I'd find nothing but his usual gas stations and lunch spots near his office, and then I could finally put this paranoia to rest. But as I scrolled through the charges from the past 3 months, my heart started sinking into my stomach. There it was, clear as day, Bella Notte, an upscale Italian restaurant downtown. $127.83 on a Tuesday night in March. I'd never been to Bella Notte. Mark had told me he was working late that Tuesday and grabbed a sandwich at his desk. Then there was another one, the Harborview Hotel, 189.50 Samais on a Friday afternoon in April. We'd never stayed at the Harborview Hotel. That Friday, Mark said he was in back-to-back client meetings all day. I kept scrolling, and the pattern became undeniable. Expensive dinners at romantic restaurants I'd never heard of, a wine bar in the arts district, another hotel charge, this time for 156.75 pies at a boutique place across town, all on days when Mark claimed to be buried in work, too busy to even text me back promptly. My favorite discovery was a charge for 78.50 cents at a lingerie boutique, and I definitely hadn't received any surprise gifts lately. I screenshotted everything, my photographer instincts kicking in even through my panic. Each charge felt like a tiny betrayal, evidence of a parallel life Mark was living without me. These weren't business expenses or innocent mistakes. This was deliberate deception, carefully planned romantic encounters that he was paying for with our shared money while lying to my face about working late. I sat there in our living room, surrounded by our wedding photos and the life we'd built together, staring at proof that my husband was living a double life. The most infuriating part? He wasn't even trying to hide it well. He was using our joint credit card, like he either didn't think I'd check or didn't care if I found out. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't paranoid, I was married to a liar, and apparently I'd been funding his affair. The credit card statements were just the beginning of my detective work, and honestly, once you start looking for evidence of betrayal, it's everywhere. A few days later, I was putting Mark's suit jacket in the closet when I felt something crinkle in the pocket. I almost ignored it, probably just a business card or receipt from lunch. But after everything I discovered, I couldn't help myself. I pulled out a receipt from Cartier. Cartier, the jewelry store where engagement rings cost more than cars. The receipt was for a white gold necklace with a pendant, 847.50 cents, purchased 3 weeks ago. I frantically checked my jewelry box, thinking maybe Mark had surprised me and I'd somehow forgotten. Nope. No white gold necklace. No pendant. No surprise gift that cost nearly $1,000. I took a photo of the receipt and put it back exactly where I found it, my hands trembling with rage. But wait, there's more. I started noticing other changes I'd somehow missed while I was playing the oblivious wife. Mark had been working out religiously for the past few months, suddenly concerned about his appearance in a way that felt new. He'd bought 3 new shirts, 2 pairs of pants, and cologne, expensive cologne that made him smell different when he kissed me goodbye. He'd gotten a haircut at a fancy salon instead of his usual barbershop and started whitening his teeth. This wasn't middle-age self-improvement. This was someone trying to impress someone new. I felt like an idiot for not connecting the dots sooner. The late nights, the mysterious charges, the expensive jewelry, the sudden vanity. Mark was having an affair, and he was putting serious effort into it. He was courting someone else with the same energy and financial investment he'd once put into courting me. Except now, I was funding it with our joint account while he lied to my face every single day. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was financial, practical, and so thoroughly planned that I had to admire his commitment to destroying our marriage. I was living with a stranger who happened to share my last name and my bed, and he was apparently very serious about his side piece. The question wasn't whether Mark was cheating anymore. The question was how long this had been going on and how stupid he thought I was. The jewelry receipt sent me into full investigation mode, and that's when I discovered Mark's text messages were cleaner than a hospital operating room. I'd noticed he was always deleting conversations, but I thought it was just his obsessive need to keep his phone organized. Turns out it was evidence management. One evening, while Mark was in the shower, his phone buzzed on the nightstand with a notification that disappeared before I could read it. When I casually glanced at his message history later, there was nothing there except conversations with me, his boss, and his mom. No coworkers, no friends, no random spam, just the most sanitized text history I'd ever seen. This from a guy who used to have message threads going back months with his college buddies and work colleagues. So I did what any self-respecting wife would do. I logged into our phone carrier's website using Mark's social security number and, our account information. Technically, I was an authorized user. So technically, I wasn't doing anything wrong, right? What I found made my blood pressure spike so high, I'm surprised I didn't stroke out right there. There was an unknown number that Mark had exchanged over 2,847 text messages with in the past 6 months. 2,847 messages. I counted them twice. The pattern was insane. It started with maybe 10 texts a month in October, then ramped up to daily exchanges by December, and by March, they were texting constantly. Some days showed over 50 messages between them. 50. I was lucky if Mark and I exchanged 5 texts in a day, and we lived together. The frequency told a story that made me sick. This wasn't a casual work friendship or someone Mark occasionally chatted with. This was an intensive, daily relationship that had been building for months while I was completely oblivious. The timestamps showed they were texting during his commute, during lunch breaks, late at night after I'd gone to sleep, and early in the morning before I woke up. Mark was essentially living a parallel life with this person, sharing his day, his thoughts, his time, everything he used to share with me. I screenshot the phone records and uploaded them to my cloud storage, building quite the digital evidence file. Mark wasn't just cheating. He was in a full-blown relationship with someone else, and judging by the text frequency, it was way more serious than some casual fling. I was looking at 6 months of emotional infidelity that had clearly become physical, funded by our joint credit card and carefully hidden through deleted messages and lies about working late. I brought the phone records to Jessica because I was spiraling and needed someone with a level head to help me figure out who this mystery number belonged to. Jessica, bless her detective heart, suggested we try reverse phone lookup services online. Most of them were garbage, but we finally found one that showed the number was registered to someone with the last name Chen, and it was linked to the same office building where Mark worked. That narrowed it down significantly, but we needed more. So Jessica, who works in HR and knows every social media stalking trick in the book, suggested we check Mark's company directory online and cross-reference it with LinkedIn profiles. We spent an hour going through every Chen in Mark's company, and that's when we found her. Emily Chen, marketing specialist, hired 8 months ago in Mark's exact department. I felt like I was going to throw up when I saw her LinkedIn photo. She was gorgeous, in that effortless way that made you hate yourself. Long black hair, perfect smile, probably 25 years old, with one of those faces that belonged in a skincare commercial. Her profile said she'd graduated from Northwestern with a degree in marketing and communications, which meant she was smart, ambitious, and working directly with my husband every single day. From LinkedIn, we found her Instagram, and that's where I really lost it. Emily Chen wasn't just beautiful. She was living this perfectly curated life filled with trendy restaurants, art gallery openings, and workout classes. Her feed was like a magazine spread of everything I used to be before I became Mark's supportive wife who stayed home while he worked late. The worst part was seeing how young and vibrant she looked in every photo. While I'd been playing house and supporting Mark's career, he'd been working alongside this stunning woman who represented everything I'd given up. She posted about her job frequently, sharing photos from company events and team meetings, and I could see Mark in the background of several pictures. They looked comfortable together, like they'd been colleagues for years instead of months. I screenshot her social media profiles and sent them to my cloud storage, adding Emily Chen's face to my growing file of evidence. Now I had a name, a face, and a sick understanding of exactly who my husband had been texting 2,847 times. Emily Chen wasn't just some random woman. She was younger, smarter, and apparently everything Mark wanted instead of his boring wife at home. I brought the phone records to Jessica because I was spiraling and needed someone with a level head to help me figure out who this mystery number belonged to. Jessica, bless her detective heart, suggested we try reverse phone lookup services online. Most of them were garbage, but we finally found one that showed the number was registered to someone with the last name Chen, and it was linked to the same office building where Mark worked. That narrowed it down significantly, but we needed more. So Jessica, who works in HR and knows every social media stalking trick in the book, suggested we check Mark's company directory online and cross-reference it with LinkedIn profiles. We spent an hour going through every Chen in Mark's company, and that's when we found her, Emily Chen, marketing specialist, hired 8 months ago in Mark's exact department. I felt like I was going to throw up when I saw her LinkedIn photo. She was gorgeous in that effortless way that made you hate yourself. Long black hair, perfect smile, probably 25 years old, with one of those faces that belonged in a skincare commercial. Her profile said she'd graduated from Northwestern with a degree in marketing and communications, which meant she was smart, ambitious, and working directly with my husband every single day. From LinkedIn, we found her Instagram, and that's where I really lost it. Emily Chen wasn't just beautiful. She was living this perfectly curated life filled with trendy restaurants, art gallery openings, and workout classes. Her feed was like a magazine spread of everything I used to be before I became Mark's supportive wife who stayed home while he worked late. The worst part was seeing how young and vibrant she looked in every photo. While I'd been playing house and supporting Mark's career, he'd been working alongside this stunning woman who represented everything I'd given up. She posted about her job frequently, sharing photos from company events and team meetings, and I could see Mark in the background of several pictures. They looked comfortable together, like they'd been colleagues for years instead of months. I screenshot her social media profiles and sent them to my cloud storage, adding Emily Chen's face to my growing file of evidence. Now I had a name, a face, and a sick understanding of exactly who my husband had been texting 2,847 times. Emily Chen wasn't just some random woman. She was younger, prettier, and apparently everything Mark wanted instead of his boring wife at home. Once I knew Emily's name and found her Instagram, I became a forensic accountant of betrayal, cross-referencing her posts with my credit card statements like I was building a case for the FBI. And holy hell, did the pieces fall into place with devastating precision. Remember that 127A difficile charge at Bella Notte on a Tuesday in March? Emily posted a photo that exact night of a candlelit dinner table with the caption, "Perfect evening with someone special," and tagged the location as Bella Notte. The Harborview Hotel charged for $189.50. Emily's Instagram story from that Friday showed a champagne flute against floor-to-ceiling windows with a harbor view captioned, "Afternoon treats." She even tagged the damn hotel. I scrolled through months of her posts, and it was like watching my marriage dissolve in real time through someone else's highlight reel. The wine bar in the Arts District, the boutique restaurant downtown, even a coffee shop I'd never heard of. Emily had been documenting their entire relationship while I was at home believing Mark's lies about working late. But the absolute gut punch came when I found a photo Emily posted 3 weeks ago, right around the time of that Cartier receipt. She was wearing a white gold necklace with a delicate pendant, the exact description from the receipt I'd found in Mark's jacket. The caption read, "Feeling grateful for unexpected beautiful surprises," with a heart emoji. The necklace was gorgeous, elegant, expensive, the kind of thoughtful gift a man gives to a woman he's serious about, the kind of gift Mark used to give me when we were dating. I screenshot that photo and compared it to the Cartier receipt, and there was no doubt. My husband had spent nearly $1,000 on jewelry for his girlfriend while I was at home meal planning and doing his laundry. Emily Chen had been flaunting my marriage's destruction on social media for months, and I'd been too trusting to notice. Every romantic dinner, every hotel afternoon, every expensive gift was documented in her feed, like trophies of conquest. The most infuriating part was how happy she looked in every photo. This wasn't some guilt-ridden affair where both parties felt terrible about what they were doing. Emily was living her best life with my husband, posting about their relationship for the world to see, while I sat at home like an idiot, wondering why Mark seemed distant lately. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, and posted in high-definition color with location tags and timestamps. I had everything I needed to destroy Mark's life, and honestly, I was ready to use it. The final nail in the coffin came when I was looking for our marriage certificate in Mark's desk drawer. I needed it for something completely unrelated to my detective work, which makes this discovery even more twisted. I was rifling through his organized files when I found a folded piece of paper wedged behind some old tax documents. It was a handwritten letter on his company letterhead, and my heart stopped when I saw "Dear Emily" at the top. I almost put it back, thinking it was work-related, but something made me unfold it completely. What I read destroyed any remaining hope I had for my marriage. Dear Emily, I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, and you're right. I can't keep living this double life. Being with you has shown me what I've been missing, what real connection feels like. Sarah is a good person, but we've grown apart, and I don't think either of us is happy anymore. I know the timing isn't ideal, but I want to be with you properly, openly, without having to sneak around or pretend. I've already contacted a lawyer to discuss divorce proceedings, and I plan to tell Sarah after the Henderson project wraps up next month. I don't want to disrupt her life during a stressful work period, but I also can't keep pretending our marriage is something it isn't. You've changed everything for me, Em. I haven't felt this alive in years. I know it's complicated with us working together, but I think we can make this work if we're smart about it. I love you, and I'm ready to start our life together properly. I just need a few more weeks to figure out the logistics. Thank you for being patient with me. Thank you for showing me what love should feel like. I can't wait to wake up next to you every morning instead of counting down the hours until I can see you again. The letter was dated 2 weeks ago and signed, "Forever yours, Mark." I read it 3 times, each word hitting me like a physical blow. Mark hadn't just been having an affair, he'd been planning his exit strategy for months while I was completely oblivious. He'd already talked to a lawyer, he'd already made his decision. He was just waiting for the right moment to blow up my life, and apparently that moment was coming next month. I was a placeholder, a convenience he was tolerating until he could seamlessly transition to his new life with Emily. The worst part was his reasoning. We've grown apart, and neither of us is happy. I'd been happy. I'd been completely, blissfully happy in our marriage until 4 weeks ago when that text message opened my eyes. Mark had been living a lie for months, and he'd convinced himself I was equally miserable to justify his betrayal. Finding that letter was my rock-bottom moment, but it was also when something shifted inside me from devastation to cold, calculated fury. I called Jessica immediately, sobbing so hard she could barely understand me, and she came over within an hour with wine and a notepad. "Okay," she said after I showed her the letter. "Crying time is over. Now it's strategy time." We spread everything out on my dining room table like we were planning a military operation. Screenshots of Emily's Instagram posts, credit card statements, phone records, the Cartier receipt, and that damning love letter. Jessica, who works in corporate HR and has seen every kind of workplace drama, helped me organize everything chronologically. "You need to document every single piece of evidence before you confront him," she said. "Print physical copies, save digital backups, timestamp everything. Mark thinks he's been clever, but he's actually been incredibly sloppy." We created a timeline that showed the progression of their relationship from October through now, mapping text frequency against credit card charges and Emily's social media posts. The pattern was clear and devastating. This wasn't a casual fling that got out of hand. This was a calculated, long-term affair with serious emotional investment from both parties. Jessica helped me research divorce attorneys in the area, and I made consultations with 3 of them for the following week. I needed to understand my rights, my options, and how to protect myself financially, since Mark had apparently already started the process without telling me. The consultation fees were worth every penny for the peace of mind of knowing I wouldn't be blindsided legally the way I'd been blindsided emotionally. I also opened my own checking account at a different bank and started transferring money from our joint savings. If Mark was planning to leave me, he wasn't going to financially destroy me in the process. I changed all my important passwords, secured my personal documents, and made copies of everything financial. Jessica stayed with me through the worst of the emotional breakdown, holding my hair while I threw up from stress and bringing me tissues when I cried until my eyes swelled shut. "You're going to get through this," she kept saying, "and when you do, you're going to be stronger than you ever imagined." By the end of the week, I had everything organized, 3 attorney consultations scheduled, and a plan for confronting Mark. I wasn't going to be the devastated wife who fell apart when her world imploded. I was going to be the woman who saw it coming and was ready for war. I planned the confrontation like a military operation. And I decided to do it over dinner because there's something poetic about destroying someone's life over a meal they think is romantic. I spent all day cooking Mark's favorite dinner, beef tenderloin, roasted vegetables, the works, and set the table with our wedding china and candles. When he walked in and saw the setup, his face lit up like Christmas morning. "What's all this for?" he asked, kissing my cheek, and probably thinking he'd lucked into some spontaneous romance from his soon-to-be ex-wife. "Just thought we should have a nice dinner together," I said, pouring him a glass of the expensive wine I'd been saving for a special occasion. This was definitely special. We made small talk through the appetizer, Mark telling me about his day at work, carefully omitting any mention of Emily Chen, I'm sure. He complimented the food, asked about my upcoming projects, played the role of loving husband so convincingly that I almost admired his acting skills. Then, as he was cutting into his steak, I reached under my chair and pulled out a manila folder. "So," I said casually, "I've been doing some research lately, and I wanted to run some things by you." I opened the folder and spread the credit card statements across the table like I was dealing cards. "Can you help me understand these charges? Bella Notte for $127 on March 15th, Harborview Hotel for $189 on April 8th. Mark's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. "Because I could have sworn you told me you were working late those nights." I pulled out the Cartier receipt next. "And this is interesting. A white gold necklace for $847, but I can't seem to find it anywhere in my jewelry box." His face was turning pale, but I wasn't done. I pulled out my phone and showed him Emily's Instagram photo, the one where she's wearing the necklace. "Beautiful piece, though. Emily has excellent taste." The way his name died in his throat when he tried to speak was almost worth 6 months of lies. Almost. "Oh," I said, leaning back in my chair with my wine, "did I mention that Emily's your sister? Because that's what you told me when you accidentally texted 'Love you too, Emily' to my phone last month." Mark's steak sat there getting cold while his entire world crumbled around him, and honestly, it was the most satisfying meal I'd ever watched someone not eat. Mark's first instinct was to gaslight me, because of course it was. "Sarah, this is insane," he said, pushing the papers away like they were contaminated. "You're taking innocent work expenses and creating some elaborate conspiracy theory. Emily is a colleague, that's it. These restaurant charges are client meetings. The hotel was for a conference. I can't believe you're going through our finances and stalking my coworkers online." He tried to laugh, but it came out as this strangled sound that made him seem even more guilty. When I didn't back down, when I just sat there sipping my wine and staring at him with the calm of someone who had spent weeks preparing for this exact moment, he shifted tactics. His voice got louder, more defensive. "You know what? Maybe I have been distant, but can you blame me? You've been so focused on your own stuff lately, so checked out of our relationship. When was the last time you took an interest in my work, my life, anything beyond your little freelance projects?" Oh, he was really going there. "I've been killing myself at the office, trying to build a future for us, and you're at home creating drama out of nothing." I let him finish his tantrum before I calmly pulled out the phone records showing 2000 847 text messages between him and Emily. Client meetings involve this much texting? I asked. Then I pulled out his handwritten love letter, the one where he declared his undying devotion to Emily and outlined his divorce plans. And I suppose this is just professional correspondence too? Mark's face went from red to white in about 3 seconds. The blustering stopped. The gaslighting stopped. He stared at the letter like he was seeing a ghost, probably wondering where the hell I'd found it and what else I might have discovered. You've been planning to leave me for months, I continued, my voice steady despite the fact that my heart was hammering. You've already talked to a lawyer. You've been living a double life, funded by our joint credit card, while lying to my face every single day. So please, tell me more about how I've been distant and neglectful. Mark opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again like a fish drowning in air. For once in this entire mess, he had absolutely nothing to say. When Mark finally spoke, it was the most pathetic attempt at damage control I'd ever witnessed. Okay, yes, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Yes, Emily and we got close. But Sarah, you have to understand, it didn't mean anything. It was a mistake that got out of hand. A mistake. 6 months of lies, 2,847 text messages, expensive dinners, hotel rooms, and $1,000 necklace, and he called it a mistake that got out of hand. I never meant for this to happen, he continued, reaching across the table like he wanted to take my hand. I pulled back like he was radioactive. It started as just friendship, work conversations, and then, I don't know, things got complicated. But it's not real, Sarah. What we have is real. Our marriage is real. I almost laughed at the desperation in his voice. This was the same man who had written, "You've changed everything for me, Em," just 2 weeks ago, and now he was trying to convince me it was meaningless? I can end it, he said, the words tumbling out faster now. I'll transfer departments. I'll cut off all contact with her. We can go to counseling. We can work through this. Please, Sarah, don't throw away 3 years of marriage over one stupid mistake. That's when I pulled out my final card. Mark, I said, my voice eerily calm. I've already consulted with 3 divorce attorneys. I've documented everything. The credit card statements, the phone records, Emily's social media posts, your love letter. I've opened my own bank account and secured copies of all our financial documents. I watched his face change as the reality hit him. You said in your letter that you'd already contacted a lawyer about divorce proceedings. Well, congratulations. So have I. Mark's mouth fell open. You could practically see the wheels turning in his head as he realized that his carefully planned exit strategy had been completely derailed. He thought he was going to control the narrative, control the timeline, control how our marriage ended. Instead, he was sitting at our dining room table with his affair spread out in front of him like evidence at a crime scene. Sarah, wait, he started, but I was already standing up, collecting my evidence folder. The mistake wasn't your affair, Mark, I said. The mistake was thinking I was stupid enough not to figure it out. For the first time in months, I was the one in control, and Mark finally understood that his double life was over. Mark moved out the next day, which was probably the fastest he'd moved on anything in our entire relationship. He packed 2 duffel bags with the efficiency of someone who had clearly thought about this moment before and went to stay with his college buddy Ryan, who I'm sure got the "my wife went crazy and kicked me out" version of events. I didn't care. I was too busy calling my lawyer and officially filing for divorce, which felt both devastating and incredibly empowering at the same time. My attorney, Patricia, was this sharp woman in her 50s who had handled everything from amicable splits to full-scale warfare, and she took one look at my evidence folder and said, "Honey, you're going to be just fine." The real kicker came when Patricia called me a week later with an update that made my blood boil all over again. "Sarah," she said, "I have some interesting news. Mark's attorney contacted our office, and it turns out your husband filed a consultation request with his lawyer 6 weeks ago, well before your confrontation. 6 weeks ago. Mark had been planning his divorce strategy for 6 weeks while still sleeping in our bed, eating my cooking, and letting me believe we were working through a rough patch. He initially filed papers requesting a separation timeline that would have been much more favorable to him, Patricia continued. Essentially, he was planning to blindside you, probably around the time frame mentioned in that letter you found, and his attorney had already drawn up preliminary documents. The audacity was breathtaking. Mark hadn't just been cheating on me. He'd been strategically planning to screw me over legally and financially while I was completely oblivious. He thought he was going to control every aspect of our divorce, the timing, the narrative, the settlement, and walk away with Emily while leaving me to pick up the pieces of a life I didn't even know was ending. The good news, Patricia said, is that your documentation changes everything. We're filing a countersuit citing adultery with evidence, and given that he was planning deception regarding marital assets and timeline, we're in an excellent position. Mark's carefully orchestrated plan had completely backfired because of one autocorrect mistake and my subsequent detective work. He thought he was playing chess while I was playing checkers, but it turned out I was playing chess too. I just started the game later and played it better. The months after Mark moved out were like slowly waking up from a dream I didn't realize I'd been having. Without his schedule to revolve around, his needs to anticipate, his career to support, I suddenly had all this space in my life that I had forgotten existed. I started reaching out to friends I'd lost touch with during my perfect wife era. College friends who lived across the country, former colleagues from before I went freelance, people I'd gradually distanced myself from because Mark found them too dramatic or not really our crowd. Turns out they'd missed me too and were thrilled to reconnect with the Sarah I used to be before I started defining myself entirely through my relationship. I threw myself into my graphic design work with an intensity I hadn't felt in years, taking on challenging projects I'd previously turned down because they conflicted with Mark's social calendar. I collaborated with a non-profit on a rebranding campaign, designed a book cover for an indie author, and even started a passion project creating artwork for local coffee shops. My creativity, which had been slowly suffocating under the weight of being perpetually accommodating, came roaring back to life. I realized how much of myself I'd sacrificed to maintain the illusion of marital harmony. My opinions, my interests, even my friend group had all been filtered through what Mark would approve of. I'd been so focused on being the woman he wanted that I'd completely lost track of who I actually was. I started going to yoga classes, took a weekend pottery workshop, and joined a hiking group that met every Saturday morning. I painted my living room a bold teal color that Mark would have hated and bought plants that turned my apartment into a jungle. I stayed up late reading books, watched movies he would have found boring, and ate cereal for dinner without having to explain myself to anyone. The strangest part was discovering that I was actually really good at being alone. I'd been so afraid of ending up single that I'd never noticed how exhausting it was to constantly manage another person's emotions and expectations. For the first time in years, I was making decisions based entirely on what I wanted, and it was intoxicating. I was rediscovering the strong, independent woman I'd been before I'd convinced myself that being half of a couple was more important than being whole on my own. 6 months after our divorce was finalized, I'm sitting in my beautifully redecorated apartment, thriving in ways I never thought possible, and I have to laugh at how perfectly everything worked out. My graphic design business is booming. Turns out, when you're not spending all your emotional energy managing a lying husband, you have a lot more creativity and drive for your actual career. I've reconnected with amazing friends, developed new hobbies, and honestly, I wake up every morning grateful for that random autocorrect mistake that blew up my fake marriage. Speaking of Mark and Emily, their epic love story imploded faster than a house of cards in a hurricane. Apparently, when their relationship wasn't forbidden and exciting anymore, when it became just regular dating between two regular people, the magic disappeared pretty quickly. Jessica, who still has friends at Mark's company, told me Emily transferred to a different department within 2 months of my divorce being finalized, and they broke up shortly after that. Turns out, stealing someone's husband is more thrilling than actually being with him when there's no marriage left to destroy. Mark tried to reach out to me a few months ago with some pathetic attempt at an apology, probably after Emily dumped him and he realized what he'd thrown away. I deleted his message without reading the whole thing because, honestly, I don't care anymore. He's someone else's problem now, and I genuinely hope he's learned something from this whole experience, though I doubt it. The funniest part of all this is that one tiny technological glitch, his phone autocorrecting to Emily instead of Sarah, saved me from years of lies and wasted time. If that hadn't happened, Mark would have successfully executed his plan to divorce me on his timeline, probably making me think it was my fault somehow, while I remained completely clueless about Emily's existence. Instead, that little mistake gave me the power to control my own story and walk away with my dignity intact. I keep thinking about how many secrets our phones hold, how much truth lives in our digital footprints, and how sometimes technology accidentally reveals exactly what we need to know. So here's my question for you. Do you think our devices sometimes betray us in ways that are actually blessings in disguise? Because honestly, I've never been more grateful for a software malfunction in my entire life.